Welcome to Blood Binge, where we satisfy your thirst for all things horror. My name is Sloan, and today we are looking at the classic 80s slasher film, A Nightmare on Elm Street, to figure out exactly where each character falls on the moral spectrum of good to evil. A Nightmare on Elm Street is the 1984 film by master of horror, Wes Craven. The plot follows a group of teens who are stalked in their dreams by the iconic killer in a red and green striped sweater. While many similar franchises of the era start with a slasher and keep bringing him back until he attains supernatural status, Freddy Krueger starts as a literal demon, setting the bar very high for evil.
Come to Freddy.
Who needs sleep anyway? Stay up with us to look at who is truly good and truly evil in this horror favorite. Let's break down the rules. First up, we'll be breaking down characters into 3 categories: the good, the gray area, and the bad to evil, starting with the most noble and ending with the most evil. Afterwards, we'll check the full leaderboard to see who the biggest saints and sinners are, as well as reveal our in-depth ranking of the killer's evil level. Our depraved formula will rank our killers on a scale of 1 to 100 to see how they stack up against other horror movie killers. Finally, we're focusing on the original A Nightmare on Elm Street. Although there is plenty to cover with the numerous sequels, crossovers, and 2010 remake, these topics are for later videos. With all of that said, let's begin. As usual, we'll start with the most noble character and work our way down. These characters are the good. Nancy Thompson is one of our favorite final girls and the winner of the gold medal of good. Not only does she happen to be a natural at kicking demonic killers clean out of the dream world, but she's a caring and considerate friend even before that. When her best friend Tina is having nightmares, she does her best to assure her it's nothing, while also going over to make sure that she's not alone. And she doesn't hook up with her hunky boyfriend while she's on friend duty, despite temptation.
We're here for Tina now, not ourselves.
When realizing that Glenn is also in danger, she does her best to make him understand the threat, despite no one taking her seriously. She's also an excellent daughter. The fact that Nancy is very emotionally mature for her age is something that really shines through when we see how she's able to forgive her mother. Despite the fact that Mrs. Thompson drinks heavily and creates the dangerous situation Nancy knows she might well die in, she makes sure to tuck her mom in and takes the time to let her know that she still loves her. Nancy goes through hell in this movie, or whatever the dream world equivalent of hell is, and is still one of the most wholesome horror characters. Our silver medal of good surprisingly goes to Mrs. Lance. Maybe it's just the incredibly low bar that we have set for parents in this movie, but Glenn's mom seems to be the gold standard. We don't get to know much about her, and she isn't fleshed out very well. From the little bit we see though, she seems like a caring mother and a loving wife. A common thing among the parents of Elm Street is that they seem to care about their child, and only their child. Everyone else is on their own. It's a very selfish love that doesn't describe Mrs. Lance. When you look at the sharp contrast between her and her husband when it comes to Glenn dating Nancy after Tina's murder, this becomes even more apparent. He wants to cut out Nancy from Glenn's life because the bars on the window across the street make him feel like she's a bad person that isn't to be trusted with his son.
I think that kid is some kind of lunatic or something.
Mrs. Lance knows that Glenn cares for her and is very compassionate for what all the poor girl has been through. Following his mother, Glenn Lance takes the bronze medal of good. He's not great at being good, but we know he means well. He's a decent boyfriend to Nancy for the most part. He loses some points for not ever really believing her about what's going on, and not giving her the benefit of the doubt when she asks him to stay awake for her either time when she makes the request. That being said, he does stick by his girlfriend and lets her know he cares, even when he believes that she's starting to lose it. He gets her out of the house, tries to calm her down, and even sneaks through her window just to check on her when he sees she's still up. I mean, he really seems like he loves Nancy, and if only he'd taken her seriously enough to stay awake, they would have been a really good couple. Bringing up the tail end of the good section, we have Sergeant Garcia. He, like Glenn, gets an A for effort. He does lose the keys to a cell where they've locked up a teenage boy, giving him enough time to be killed by Freddy, but hey, he tries. At least the keys are a genuine mistake and not willful ignorance on his part. With that said, our good section comes to a close. These next characters fall in the neutral territory of our morality spectrum. This is the gray area. At the top of the gray section, we have Rod Lane. He's kind of a jerk. He seems to be mostly interested in Tina for sex and gets very persistent with her even when she's mad at him. We don't know what he did to start the fight, but based off of his immature nature and poorly timed jokes, we have to side with her. Although he doesn't seem like a great guy, we don't get to see a ton of him, and there are more than a few instances where it's clear he has a more sensitive side as well. He definitely didn't deserve to die like that, or take the fall for his girlfriend's murder. Speaking of his girlfriend, let's talk about Tina Gray. We empathize with her. She has a rough time right from the beginning, and is the first character to meet their grisly end to the knife hand of Freddy. Her death is painful and traumatic, and she was terrorized leading up to it. Still though, her coping mechanism is less than ideal. She gets Nancy to come over after learning her mother will be out of town, and deciding she doesn't want to suffer her nightmares alone.
You dreamed about the same creep I did.
That we can understand. She also gets Glenn involved, making it more of a get-together than a girls' night. Also fine. When she unexpectedly takes Rod back, however, the favor takes on a certain level of selfishness. She asks Nancy not to leave her alone with him in the house, but then completely disappears with no regards to her other two guests or the awkward situation she's put them in. It's not the worst thing you could do to friends, trust me, I know, but it's the only thing she lives long enough to do. Coming in just under her and rounding out our gray area is Mr. Lance. He is also not a kind person. He doesn't do anything outright evil. In fact, he thinks he's looking out for his son. But the way that he's so harsh to judge Nancy over her parents' actions does make him seem a little callous, even if he's just trying to protect his boy. His manners over the phone
Glenn's asleep. You'll have to talk to him tomorrow.
are also abysmal. Finally, we have reached the end of the gray area and we have entered the dark side. These characters are the bad and evil. Easing us into the world of bad characters is Sergeant Parker. Much like Garcia, he has one job that he can't seem to do without casualties. He's told very plainly to come get Lieutenant Thompson if he sees anything weird from the house. Yet, when Nancy starts screaming for help, banging on doors and breaking windows, he watches for several minutes before finally realizing he should maybe go tell someone.
Maybe I better go tell the lieutenant.
We have deemed this a worse crime than Garcia's misplacing of the cell keys, and we've got a couple reasons why. One is that this was a direct order from his superior that he couldn't figure out. The second is that he didn't seem to register the panic or sincerity in Nancy's cries for help, something he should be able to spot and respond to easily as a cop. Next, we move on to Mrs. Gray, Tina's mom. Her only indiscretion, aside from an implied promiscuity, is going out of town, leaving her teenage daughter alone in the house for a few days. This might not be bad enough to earn her a spot on the bad list were it not for the timing of her trip. She already knows that Tina is having nightmares, struggling with some paranoia, and decides to just up and leave her daughter with very little warning. Since it's one of the only things we actually see Mrs. Gray do, it just doesn't put her in a very kind light. We don't blame her for Tina's death, but we do think she's the least attentive parent in Springwood. And also the next town over, maybe. Our Bronze Medal of Evil goes to Marge Thompson, Nancy's mother. There's maybe something to be said about the parental love required to hunt down and kill a child murderer who is freed on technicality, but vigilante killings are, at best, a gray area. Marge confesses to being in the group of parents that hunted down Krueger and burned him alive to protect the children.
He's dead, honey, because Mommy killed him.
Unlike some of the other parents who we presume were involved, we say presume because their involvement is never explicitly discussed, despite the knowledge that Freddy is targeting their children. Marge seems to feel guilt over her actions while maintaining the position that Freddy deserved to die. Her guilt manifests as a drinking problem, and while she doesn't exactly get credit for alcoholism, it paints her in a sympathetic light. It also says a lot that she's willing to confide her crimes in Nancy when she sees how genuinely afraid of Krueger Nancy is. What loses her a lot of ground is the fact that she never believes her daughter. Instead of asking how Nancy heard about Krueger, if not for her dreams as Nancy claims, she tells her about the murder. She actually witnesses one of these dream attacks at the sleep clinic and still believes that it's her daughter going crazy and this is not a consequence of her own actions.
This'll help you sleep.
She goes so far as to put iron bars on the windows to the house, locking the door up before passing out drunk. This cements the idea to the neighbors that their daughter has a problem, cuts off her contact with the person looking out for her, and proves to be a hazard. Even if Nancy had just been crazy, they could have easily both burned to death in that house. She's coming from the right place, but there are too many bad actions taken for her to be considered good. Come on, Mom. Now let's look at her husband, and winner of our Silver Medal of Evil, Lieutenant Thompson. It's amazing someone as pure as Nancy came from the Thompson family. We do think that Lieutenant Thompson has good intentions, but he expresses them even worse than his wife. He shows no signs of guilt over the murder they helped commit, and seems to be in denial that Krueger ever existed. He's all for keeping Nancy home, locking her up, and keeping her in the dark about everything that's going on. He does this from a distance though, more busy with his work than looking out for his family. This is particularly frustrating because he doesn't seem to be very good at his job. The only time we see him succeeding at police work is when he brings in the innocent Rod, which he only manages with Nancy's help by using her essentially as bait. When she gets mad about this, he blames her for going to school in the first place.
What the hell were you doing going to school today for anyway?
He isn't a great cop, but he's especially not a good father. Even when Nancy pleads with him to come home in 20 minutes, he lies to her about being there and assigns his least competent man to watch over the house. Nearly everyone in the movie gets a slap on the wrist for disbelieving Nancy, but Lieutenant Thompson deserves more than that for not even taking the time to hear her out properly. And now, our Gold Medal of Evil goes to the man of our nightmares, Freddy Krueger. Of course, we'll be breaking down his overall score when we get to the evil board, don't worry. But for now, let's just look at the facts. He was a child murderer in life. He was guilty, convicted, and released on a technicality. The parents of the town know that he's such a danger to society that they decide to band together and burn him to death, including members of law enforcement. Then his evil is powerful enough that he continues killing children in their dreams as revenge. That's some terrifying stuff. There's also the nature of the deaths, which we think is something important to look at. Part of the fear comes from the fact that he kills in a dreamscape where any twisted nightmare scenario is possible. This also makes the torture leading up to the deaths very personal and weirdly intimate. With all the gore and sound effects and general wildness of the death scenes, it's easy to forget just how creepy Krueger is in the way that he goes after these kids, especially Nancy.
Freddy.
The innuendos that he makes are deeply unsettling when you remember that these victims are all underage. Even though this is implication, it really does put a darker lens on what exactly happened in the boiler room and why those parents were so angry. But since we're on the topic anyway, let's take a look at just how wretched he is by getting into our evil board. Okay, as usual, we are ranking our killers on a scale of 1 to 100, with 100 being the highest evil score possible. We score them in 10 categories, each on a scale of 1 to 10, then tally them all together. Remember, more points equals more evil. First up, kill count. Very few movies have made it so difficult to calculate deaths, which is a very ambiguous term throughout the entire franchise. After careful consideration, we have decided to award Freddy credit for all 4 of his on-screen kills, as well as 20 points for the children he murdered prior to his original death. We don't know exactly how many children that is, but Nancy's mother does confirm that it was at least 20. So I think this is a fair enough number. That brings his total kills to 24. That comes out to a total of 6 points via our chart. Next, does the killer have the capacity to love somebody? Anybody? Whether or not Freddy was ever able to love somebody may be up for debate. We never get to see what he was like as a human. In his current form though, he shows love for nothing but killing. And his capacity for hate is so strong that it has warped him into a demon. We're not knocking any points off here. Was the killer wronged in some way? Freddy gets a 5 out of 10 here, which we feel is a fair compromise. He was wronged, he was murdered violently, and is seeking revenge on those who did it, which normally would bring him down to a 0. What holds him back and gives him some evil points is that he was killed because he was already a child murderer before that. So we know that the killings predate his revenge arc. Now, how much pleasure or joy does the killer get from their actions? Another 10 out of 10 here. Freddy is clearly having the time of his life. Death on life, you know what we mean. Scaring, torturing, and eventually murdering his 4 victims across the film. Does the killer need to kill to survive? Originally, we were going to say no. Freddy doesn't need to kill to survive. He's already dead. Nothing's gonna bring him back. But we're knocking off a few points for the idea that he's literally feeding off of the fear of his victims. This is how Nancy is able to walk away from him after her mother's death. Since she's still having nightmares at the end of the movie, the theory is flimsy enough that it only gets a few points knocked off of the total here. But it is technically possible that the entity known as Freddy Krueger needs to kill to exist, and we're giving him 7 points for the category. Does the killer have some warped moral code or believe they are killing for the greater good? Not at all. He actually relishes in the idea of being evil and brings home the full 10 points. Is the killer especially cruel in how they kill or torture? Yes! We already talked about the dreamscape deaths being personalized and gruesome. When you factor in the sleep deprivation torture that the victims must put themselves through while away from Freddy, there is no respite for them at all. Do the killers show mercy? I would say that Freddy's one of the most merciless horror villain slashers. He doesn't have a high kill count, but it's clear he likes to take his time, and he shows no signs of stopping. He gets a 10 out of 10 here as well. Does the killer have any diminished mental capacity? If anything, he has a heightened mental capacity, playing in a psychological battlefield of dreams. Is the killer a demon, satanic, or otherwise an extension of the devil or hell? We don't know what exactly Freddy is, but there is little doubt that he's demonic in nature. Due to the supernatural manner in which he kills his victims, we're going to go ahead and give him a conservative 8 points. Finally, our formula requires us to divide their score by 50% if a killer was being controlled by some known supernatural or otherwise mind-controlling entity. He's not. So the final score on our evil board comes out to Freddy Krueger with a total score of 86. Let's award some medals. Oppa! The gold, silver, and bronze medals of good go to Nancy, Mrs. Lance, and Glenn, respectively. Our medal for most righteous kill has to go to Freddy for the murder of Nancy's mother. Although there were more righteous kills talked about and or implied, such as Freddy's murder or his implied downfall at Nancy's avoidance, the only on-screen death that has any justification at all is for Mrs. Thompson. While we don't think she deserved to die, she was in the group that murdered Krueger, and it's more righteous for him to kill her than the children he's been targeting. Our greatest sacrifice medal goes to Nancy. She is the only one who fully understands what's happening, and she is still willing to go into her dreams and pull Freddy out so he can face justice again. Of course, what she actually ends up losing is a mother, but her bravery is unquestionable, and we know her life will never be the same.
I know you too well now, Freddy.
As far as our sinner medals go, the gold, silver, and bronze medals of evil go to Freddy, Lieutenant Thompson, and Mrs. Thompson. The cruelest kill goes to Freddy, specifically for the way that he killed Tina Gray. Although Glenn was a strong contender for the fountain of blood gushing out of the waterbed, that was a relatively quick death when compared to what Tina suffered, as she was ripped apart by the glove. The worst betrayal medal goes to Glenn for falling asleep while Nancy tries to save him, twice. Part of it is that he doesn't believe her, but maybe he would if he had stayed awake to see any of the supernatural things she was trying to warn him about. The Darwin medal goes to Mrs. Thompson. She puts bars on the windows, locks the doors, and passes out drunk. We talked about the fact that this is a huge fire hazard and she and Nancy are dangerously close to both burning in the house. But we just want to take this opportunity to once again highlight what a terrible plan this is. And finally, our 7 deadly sin medals. The lust medal goes to Rod. He is the embodiment of a stereotypical, lusty, teenage boy, and this medal is in honor of that. The envy medal goes to Glenn for wanting to be the embodiment of a stereotypical lusty teenage boy. His manners and affection for Nancy spared him from winning the lust medal, but the envious look he shoots to Rod for getting Tina to the bedroom speaks for itself.
Morality sucks.
He also wins the gluttony medal for his stress eating, and the sloth medal for, you guessed it, falling asleep on watch. Twice. The Pride Medal is awarded to Mr. Thompson for thinking he has the situation handled at times, even when he clearly doesn't. Right up until the end, he's convinced he knows what's best for his daughter. The Greed Medal goes to Freddy. He's so desperate to attain what he desires, killing, that not only does he die for it, but dying doesn't stop him from attaining it. His greediness for death is the entire premise of the story. Finally, the Wrath Medal is awarded to Mrs. Thompson. Although it could have gone to any one of the vigilante parents guilty of Freddy's death, we are awarding it to Mrs. Thompson. While she arguably feels the worst about her actions, her confession makes her a symbolic stand-in for all the parents whose anger drove them to burn a man alive. And that's it! The entire cast of A Nightmare on Elm Street ranked from good to evil, as well as a deep dive into the evil score of the iconic Freddy Krueger. Yeah, we'll be continuing with the series, but make sure to let us know what horror movies need the good to evil treatment next. Do us a huge favor and like this video, as well as hit that notification bell so you know whenever we upload a new video to Blood Binge, where we satisfy your thirst for all things Betty White. Horror! Thanks for watching.